Hello, friend, and welcome to this super special episode of the SpeechGoods podcast. So, if you did not know, this episode is airing within the first couple weeks of June. And if you did not know, June is actually Pride Month for the LGBTQ plus community. And in honor of this month, I knew I wanted to do an LGBTQ plus centered episode talking about the financial side of the members of this community. And I feel like it's just not talked about enough. As I was thinking about how I wanted to approach this subject, I knew that I really wanted to have a member of that community present for the interview and for this episode so that we could really get their story and their perspective. I think sometimes when we think of finances and money, we kind of think of the cold side of like numbers and calculations and really, crazy ridiculous spreadsheets. But there is a large emotional side to finances. There's a life-changing side to finances. And this is something that if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I've discussed at length. And when I reached out to AC Goldberg to be on this episode with me, I was so thankful that he made time in his, I know what is a redonkulously busy schedule to record with me. And honestly, listening to AC's story and just all of the things that he's been through and things that I never really had even thought about, it was so eye-opening. And I feel like it's a great message, especially as we're entering Pride Month, to continue to create an environment of empathy and really seeking to understand each other because we all have a story. And this podcast is a platform for our stories to be told as SLPs, OTs, PTs, professionals, and honestly, just as human beings. So this interview was so inspiring. I told AC later, I kind of started to come to tears at a couple points during the interview. I don't think you could tell in the recording, but I do want to tell you a little bit about AC before we actually get into the interview. AC Goldberg, he/him, PhD, CCC SLP, is an intersex, transgender, speech-language pathologist and DEI consultant. AC began his career in hospitals where he faced various forms of workplace discrimination due to his transgender identity. For the past 18 years, he has been a school clinician specializing in social communication and working with adolescents with complex neurological profiles. He strives to create safe, affirming environments for everyone in his care. AC also provides gender voice expansion services, and he's dedicated to ending the mistreatment and discrimination of trans and gender nonconforming people in educational, medical, and clinical settings. AC is ASHA certified, SAC affiliated, and a member of the WPATH, and also the member of the Trans Voice Initiative. He also offers cultural responsiveness trainings through his DEI consulting business, Transplaining, and continuing education through his platform, the Credits Institute. Also, wink, wink, winky face, AC does tell us a little bit about a lot of the courses that he's been offering. And he said he's going to do a special discount code for SpeechGoods podcast listeners. So yeah, you're going to want to listen to this bad boy all the way through. Okay, I'm not going to hold you up anymore. You need to just go do the dang thing and listen to the interview. So let's get to this awesome conversation with AC. Hello, AC. How are you doing today?
I am happy that it's Friday and I am happy to be hanging out with you.
Yes, literally we had to control ourselves because we kept getting into good conversation and we were just like, okay, we need to press the record button and chill the heck out.
Seriously, it was like, okay, we keep talking about this and we're not going to leave anything for the listeners. We're just going to get the whole conversation done and then be like, oh, whoops.
Exactly. So we decided to be nice and save some good stuff for you guys. So I know AC, I just read your bio. We've heard all the awesome things that you're doing, but can you expand on that a little bit? Tell us about you and your mission and all of these different amazing endeavors that you're doing.
Wow, my mission. That's a great question. What I really strive to do is to help our profession and the world in general move forward in terms of inclusive practices and really foster a sense of belonging for transgender, nonconforming people and other people within the two-spirit LGBTQIA plus population, because it really is a hostile environment in this country and in other countries around the world for people like us. So what I strive to do is to give the education that I feel is necessary that's missing from clinical education, from education that we get at universities, from, sort of employee training. You get employee training when you sign up for a job. They teach you how to not harass someone. They teach you how to, use whatever machinery you're using or whatever it is. But you don't ever learn about how to interact with someone who's trans or gender nonconforming. And, those soft skills, which are super important, um, they have to be taught explicitly, especially if you have no direct exposure to the population. So, what I would like to do is make the world a friendlier place for people like me, but for people like me when I was younger. Because at this point, I'm out there doing the work and it's still hostile, but I want to sort of forge a path so that people who are younger than me don't have the same experiences that I've had, with regard to employment, with regard to medical care, with regard to educational situations. I want to make sure that I'm creating a better future for people like me. And I guess that is my life's mission. And I've got a number of endeavors. I run a consulting business called Transplaining, where you can kind of find webinars, as well as the ability to contact me to do things like redo your intake forms or consult with you about issues around equity within your business. And you can also find me at the Credits Institute, which is an intersectional cultural responsiveness training platform where I am seeking to educate our field and actually go beyond our field, but educate our field in issues related to, race, neurotype, gender, ability, disability. I am very much trying to center minoritized people in that platform and help with wealth redistribution within our profession, because I think it's really important that all of us are compensated for this work. What I've done is put together courses that are, worth 73 ASHA CEU hours and 30 plus ASHA CEU hours, that are deeper dives into topics related to cultural responsiveness, related to anti-racism, related to gender inclusive practices and things like that. And I really hope very much that people will engage with that platform, because I see it as being something that's essential to all healthcare providers. You can be you can know exactly what you're doing with regard to, um, you know, treating pediatric feeding disorders. But if you don't know how to be sensitive to someone's cultural background, then you're not going to do the best job, even though you're really good at your job. And if you don't know how to be inclusive of, people who are, different genders, then you're not going to do the best job, even if you're really good at your job. So my goal there is not only to help center and uplift minoritized people within our profession, because there are so few, and redistribute wealth, meaning having people pay for continuing education and have that directly paid to people who need money more than big companies who put out these CEU things. This is just me. Like, I'm there programming it, I'm there, putting courses together, and I'm there giving the majority of that money to someone who needs it, who has decided to teach a course because they're trying to pay off their student loan debt, or they're trying to, handle, credit card debt, or anything related to their finances, because people of minoritized backgrounds have less money. And we are going to get into that now.
Yes, like just oh my goodness, all those things. First of all, I think, and that's a really big part of why I wanted to have you on the show, is I feel like empathy I think that's what needs to be created in these types of spaces. And I feel like when to empathize with someone, like you have to learn about them, you have to care to learn about them and their experiences and everything going on. And I know, for this particular conversation, we're going to talk about the financial side. And I don't know if any of you listening out there are like, I wonder, that seems like a weird topic to be talking about for, when we're talking about the LGBTQ community, for, talking about money. But something that I talk about on the show all the time is your financial well-being is very highly linked to your mental well-being, your emotional well-being, your spiritual well-being. We know that having excessive amounts of debt or excessive amounts of any kind of financial stress it literally stresses you out. Like it make give you some extra heart palpitations. And so when you have these communities that have, we know statistically, and I'm going to get into a little bit of stats in a second, but that we know statistically have more struggles financially, I think it's really, really important, because however anyone feels about anything, I feel like finances is a place like we can all relate to that, right? We can all
Mm-hmm.
relate to this idea of like, I want to buy a house, or I want to get a job that pays me what I'm worth. Like that's something I talk about on the show all the time. And so as I was looking into the stats of this episode, and that's when I reached out to you, AC, because I was like, I need someone to come help me with this. I was really shocked, and it made me really sad, a lot of the stats that I found. So I'm just gonna share a little bit of what I found with everybody out there, and kind of see, and then kind of get into some questions with you, if that's okay.
That sounds great.
So just so everyone knows, some of the things I found, it said, and these are all of the sources that I found these from. They're going to be linked in the show notes as well, if it's something that you want to look up. But I found that lesbians earned 11% less than heterosexual women. Gay men made 32% less than heterosexual men. Trans people were 4 times more likely to earn less than 10 grand a year than the general population. And actually, CNBC did a survey, and it said that LGBTQ millennials have more student loan debt, which a lot of us know the stress of student loan debt. They have more student loan debt, lower average income than peers, and overall feel less financially secure than just the general population of millennials. And another interesting stat that I found was that LGBTQ millennials on average made $59,400 per year, while their straight counterparts made $67,800 per year. So that's almost an extra 10 grand a year, which kind of lines up with that statistic that I mentioned earlier about how trans people were more likely to earn 10 grand less than their
Mm-hmm.
cisgender straight counterparts. And I was just like, wow, that is insane. Because I'm even just looking at the just practicality of, I contribute 20 to 30% of my income to retirement. And
Mm-hmm.
knowing that those individuals are making 20 to 30% less, how does that impact things? And even, and I know we're going to get into this later too, but then I just started thinking about, even having a family, you know, I'm assuming a lot of couples in the LGBTQ community, they're having to pay for some sort of like medical procedures to have children, things like that. My husband and I, it didn't cost us anything to get pregnant, like it didn't cost us anything. And so I just really want to hear kind of your story, and give us give the audience out there just some real, like, tangible, like, this has been your experience, and bring a little bit more human to the stats that I just read. So can you tell us, like, how do you feel just in general, like being trans has affected you financially?
I probably have less than half the wealth I would have had if I were cisgender. And I'll tell you all about that. I am very privileged because I am white. And kind of framing this entire talk, I want to make sure that everyone understands that I'm white and I came from a privileged background. I went to a 4-year college that to I took out loans my junior year because I spent it abroad and that wasn't covered, but I had scholarships as well. So my primary student loans were one undergrad school year and then my master's and my doctorate. I was able to pay the fees that were associated with it, but it wasn't all that much, as the way that doctorates go. But I am very privileged in that I come from that background, but very swiftly after I came out, which was when I moved out of my parents' house for graduate school, my parents cut me off completely. They didn't talk to me for many years, and I was very quickly on my own, and I was already financially relatively independent. I had had jobs since I was 12 years old. I knew what I was doing. But at that time, being in graduate school, it was very hard because we can't really work when we're in graduate school. So at that time, I was like, okay, I'm going to need cost of living loans. I need loans to pay for school, cost of living loans to pay for school. And, I'm going to have to work a couple of jobs just to make sure I can like pay for books and groceries and things. And that was rough. I really worked very hard, through graduate school. I feel like a lot of people who go to graduate school, it's sort of half and half. Some people have to have jobs and other people don't. And that in and of itself creates a situation of inequity, just in terms of what happens in our field at the graduate level. So, as I graduated, with my master's, I kind of, came out with more debt than obviously than I went in with. And I then decided to pursue a doctorate, solely so that I could have a gender neutral honorific. And it turns out I don't like to be called doctor. So, it's kind of, ironic. But during that time, I didn't have anyone's financial support. I was living on my own for the first time. I was working multiple jobs. I was going to school, and I was having to pay to access my healthcare because no no gender affirming healthcare was paid for by health insurance, at all. And at that time, even the health insurance that I did have, because I was transgender, I was unable to access regular services because people would say like, oh, we don't see transgender people here. And I would have to go and drive. I have a physical disability, which is another thing that's very expensive that I deal with, on in an ongoing way. I would have to drive hours and hours to see specialists who would actually agree to see me, even though it had nothing to do with my gender that I have a physical disability, because people didn't understand back then that they, you know, had to treat me. And so that was very stressful as well. So, between having to pay for my own healthcare, both related to gender and not related to gender, having to, pay my own bills, without any help or support, and also having the load of paying all of the legal fees to navigate, changing your legal documentation, which now there are up clinics in most places, where people can get that done for minimal fees or for completely free because everyone knows how expensive that process used to be. Between all of that, um, I would say that, I spent, roughly $70,000, and that was just all my money, roughly $70,000 in my mid 20s, just accessing healthcare. And I'll tell you what that healthcare was. It was me having to sit with a therapist who I didn't like because she was the only person that I could find who would give me the letter that I could bring to, the RMV here is our registry of motor vehicles, where I could prove that I was, living as a man and I could get my gender marker changed on my license. And I had to pay to go. She had to see me for like years and years just to be like, well, are you living as a man? Like, what does that even mean? Like, I've been living as the same person this whole time. But there's a lot of like gatekeeping in trans medicine where, you have to prove things, not just to access things like a letter for the registry of motor vehicles, but also to access things like hormones, and things like surgery. Surgery was very important to me, and that became a pressing issue, to me at top surgery. I am wearing a Protect Trans Kids shirt that I am proudly showing to anyone who's viewing this webinar, and a pronoun pin. My pronouns are he, him, and his for anyone who's wondering. And that was very expensive. No insurances covered it, and I had to go out of state. I had to pay to be in a hotel for 3 weeks, post-op. And all of that was incredibly, incredibly expensive. And if you think about that as a young person who is also experiencing workplace discrimination, I had situations where my employer asked me to sign a bathroom log for a single stall, anyone could use it bathroom. And there were all these conversations about the bathroom. And I was like, am I going to the bathroom too much? Like, what's happening? And like, she just wasn't comfortable with me in the bathroom, even though anyone could use that bathroom and it was a single stall bathroom. That happened to me. I was touched in a sexual way by a supervisor at a next job, and the head of her boss basically told me I was, deserving of that because of how I was. I faced a lot of very bizarre workplace discrimination that made it hard for me to stay in a job, hold a job, kind of grow my wealth, and feel comfortable and stable. So I was working, a million jobs. I was, private practice, 12 hours on a Sunday, driving from house to house. I have been hustling since I was 19, and I still am doing it. You heard all of the things that I'm doing. I'm trying to make up this gap that I have, that I never would have had I not had to access any of this. You talked about reproductive healthcare and the cost of that. My partner and I were very lucky. I am a gestational parent. I'm a seahorse dad. And the only thing that we had to pay for was donor sperm. And that only cost us $40,000, which I know you're going to be like, that's a lot of money. But that's what it cost us. And that was our whole sort of they required us to get tested for certain things that was our entire amount that it cost us to create a family. And we have two wonderful kids who are now 9.5 and 6. But that was a lot of money. And then people like me are also oftentimes looking to move to safe states. And we had a failed relocation to Canada, actually, in the middle of the Trump administration, actually, right when COVID was first hitting. We moved to Canada, and that was incredibly expensive. And it's actually surprisingly not more liberal there, and it's much harder actually to access healthcare than it is in Massachusetts and Ontario. But that's not why it didn't work out. Things were not working out for us, and we moved back to our home in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is where I'm talking to you from today. But if I weren't white, I don't know where I would be. Like, there is so much discrimination, and I witness my Black colleagues, in an ongoing way in the speech world, handling so much discrimination. I still can't really find another job. Like, I have been I'm a school speech pathologist. I like being a school SLP, but I'm just kind of ready to move on and do something different. But this is no sort of like shade being thrown or anything like that at school SLPs, at my workplace, anything like that. I apply and I apply and I apply, and I have achieved so much in our field. If you look me up, I am probably, one of the most invited guest speakers that there is. And I can't get someone else to hire me. And it's all very bizarre. And, there's the whole like, well, why? Why won't someone hire you? I think it's kind of obvious. I was passed over last summer to work in trans voice clinics. You know, who better than me? I'm an expert in that. Aside from another trans person who also has a voice specialty. That's like it's one of those things. I've been trying to break into academia, and I did have a really nice offer from a university in California, but I can't relocate my kids again. We do live in Massachusetts now. It's safe here, but we just had a failed relocation. We can't do it. It's also really expensive in California, and it's a lower salary. So that's one of those things that I factored in and just said, I really wish I could take this job, but I can't. But there's all sorts of remote work that I've been applying for. There are all sorts of things that I would love to do. Um, and why is the big question. You know,
Mhm.
why? And it's because I'm Googleably trans.
I was going to ask you, so how does that work? Like, I'm assuming, that's not something you put on a resume, but like, what is it? Do you feel like once they Google your name, they see like all the content that you put out? Like, is that what you feel is possibly happening?
Oh, I know that that's what's happening because last summer I ran, I sort of did a confirmation bias study myself because I wasn't getting hits back and I was like, everywhere is so short staffed. I wound up going back to my old job that I left before I went to Canada. And like I said, no ill will. I've just been ready to kind of move on. And I wound up going back and they're happy to have me back. And it's fine to be back, but it's one of those things where I've been ready for a long time. And like I was able to find employment in Canada and, I felt bad leaving so quickly, honestly, after everything I went through to get up there, but it didn't work out. It was expensive. And I swear, last summer I applied for like 400 jobs. And what I did after I wasn't getting hits back was I applied under my legal name. AC Goldberg is not my legal name. You won't be able to find my legal name if you Google me, and that is on purpose. So
Hmm.
I won't even update my MPI number. My MPI number is under my dead name. Go ahead, Google it. I don't care if you know what it is. But that's not my legal name. I keep my legal name under wraps because I applied for jobs under my legal name and I got calls. And I was like, I'm not going to work in these places. Like, it is such a red flag to me that people were willing to interview legal name me, but not interview trans me, that I wouldn't want to work in a place like that. And I did get some interviews, but I didn't get any. I did get one other job offer that I'm kind of sad that I didn't take, but you know, it it would have been another school SLP job. And like I said, I'm ready for something different. I do have a doctorate. Like I would love to do something more in academia. Like I have been doing a lot of research. I serve on a lot of committees. I already do the job of an academic. I teach courses, but I don't have a house. I don't have anywhere that houses me. And honestly, at this point now, I'm kind of digging remaining at large, but it's very hard to feel like I can't get out of this job because I can't get another job when there's an international shortage of people in our field.
Mhm.
And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, that, and I also have a physical disability that I have to disclose, and I'm thinking like, well, I wonder what kind of discrimination I'm experiencing. And I can tell you very much, I'm part of the Trans Voice Initiative, which is TVI. You can find us at transvoiceinitiative.com. Um, all of us have had similar experiences gaining employment. So we know what's going on.
And I mean, and it's crazy. I mean, that's all connected to quality of life. That's connected to, just like you said, wealth building. Like a lot of the perks of the SLP field are, oh, if I'm done with this setting, I can go to this setting, or I can, or, oh, there's a shortage. Like there's always going to be a job out there for me. But I think, that's something, it's something that you have to think about, that like, I don't have to worry about that. I was thinking the other day, I live in southern conservative Louisiana. That's where I live. And I have my private practice. I've been able to increase my income with it. It's significantly increased my quality of life, blah, 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 blah. I I don't, there's no way that I would have been as successful if I were part of the LGBTQ community. And I can say that pretty surely down here.
Well, you wouldn't be hired. I'm not even hired in Massachusetts.
Right. Or like, but
Like,
even promoting myself, like
yeah,
even, going into doctor's offices and things like that. I just, and that like private practice has changed my life to be able to do that down here.
it,
And the fact that
it's
like I
great. Yeah.
probably never would have pursued it otherwise, do you know?
I felt safest in my private practice because
Mhm.
I sort of had a self-selecting, type of clientele. So, um, my private practice was always a self-selecting group, and I was always just word of mouth. I mean, I actually, I've been thinking about reopening. I have a private gender affirming voice practice, and I take one client at a time right now because that's all I have time for. And I take that person for free. In Massachusetts, all insurances cover it, but I don't even want to navigate someone's copays or anything like that. I want to make sure that they feel holistically cared for and that they don't feel like it's a financial burden. But I was thinking about reopening my private practice, just more broadly, so that maybe I can just have all of these side gigs rolled into one thing, and I don't have, a day job. But I am nervous to pull that trigger because of, what if I wanted to get back into the workplace and I couldn't? Like that, things like that scare me. It really is kind of nerve-wracking to be, not only senior, so you're a little bit more expensive, but also trans and nobody wants to hire you. Like, those two things, and the whole physical disability thing, like all of that combined, it makes I mean, I think that people just don't want to be held accountable. I mean, that's my guess. Like, they don't want me in their workplace because, in order to have me in their workplace, they would actually have to have inclusive practices. They would have to have, they would have to have, culturally responsive training for everyone. They would have to have good intake forms. They would have to follow the laws, things that I feel like I'm kind of consistently, hearing people, people will come consult with me about things, and I'll say, what, like, that's inconsistent with Title IX. And people don't want to, like, people know that I'm informed and they don't want me around calling them in on those things when I'm not trying. Like, I'm not going to come somewhere and be like, you're doing it wrong. I'm only going to come somewhere and be like, hey, can I fix this? Like, I want to help. Like, let me redo this intake form. Like, let's make sure this procedure, is correct, legally. I'm not going to, like, flame someone, go to the media. Like, I've never done that before. But I think people are worried about that. And that really limits my potential employment. That all being said, like, I do have a job. I do have income, but I am still trying to make up this sort of core amount of income that I feel I have not been able to sort of hold on to or retain or grow, because of all of these expenses that I've had related to being trans, very specifically.
I think all those things, it really compounds. I'm sure there's people who, are probably listening to this thinking, they're not trans or gay or anything. And they've probably been in situations like where they had to pay their way through school and things like that. But to me,
Oh,
like,
of
it's
course.
just when you have I think the effect of like all of these different things compounding on each other. So even going back to, my parents didn't pay for my graduate school, but my parents, they paid for my apartment and they helped me pay for groceries. So that saved me probably $50,000.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like
That's
I was
wonderful.
very grateful.
That's
And
fantastic.
yeah, like, but all of those little things compounding. There was even something I was looking into, which I'd be curious, your experience for this, uh, that for even home mortgages, that they were denied residential mortgages 73.1% more often. And they usually they were rejected more often for mortgages, like same-sex couples or trans couples. And then they also just got worse interest rates. I don't have the stat right in front of me, but I
So
think it was like
let
a
me tell you a little.
0.2% more.
Oh, so let me tell you a little story about that. A tale of, me presenting in two different ways and having two different, being perceived two different ways. So when we first bought our house, so it's funny because everyone's going to be like, oh my gosh, how did you buy a house with all those expenses? Literally, I've been working 80 to 90 hours a week for the last 20 years. No, 23 years, because of this. And I'm still doing it because I need to, because, I want to be able to pay my mortgage off and have enough money to, retire comfortably and, deal with the expenses related to my physical disability. I have to make my home more accessible. There's a lot that I have to pay for, that nobody else is going to pay for. And, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But I forgot what I had a jumping off point, and then my brain went elsewhere. Hold on, it'll come back.
Mortgages.
But
That's what
oh,
you're.
mortgages. So I'm a big refinancer. Um, every time the rates go down, well, now they're not, but right now we have a 1.39. And if you think about that, I think that's the lowest that they ever went. So
It's like half of
I,
inflation.
uh-huh,
Well, normal
I
inflation.
half of normal inflation. I'm very much driven by like watching market trends and making sure that like, right now all the markets are down, and like I am just like looking at my portfolio and trying to invest more money because, it's a great time to do that. So anyone who's listening, like if the S&P 500 is still tanking, buy some stock.
It's on
Um
sale. It's
yes,
on sale right now.
exactly. It's on clearance. It's all on clearance.
Yeah.
So, go for it. Like this is a fantastic investment opportunity. So basically I rate hunted for a really long time, but before when we bought our house in 2007, I hadn't yet legally changed my name or my gender marker, but I looked like this. And it was like getting a bank to even work with us because of the way my name was versus how I presented was almost impossible. Getting an interest rate, even though we had money in the bank, we both had jobs. I didn't understand. Our credit is always, like 800 or more. Like, we pay our stuff. We're on top of it. We couldn't get sort of lenders to see us because like everything was about my gender. Just like I was saying, like I had to go out of state for healthcare for like mundane things. Everything was about my gender. That was like, I had dysphagia at one point due to like some issues with my cervical spine. And everyone kept being like, well, that's because of something you're trying to do with your voice. My physical disability, things like, oh, I was opening a window and I tore my bicep tendon. You shouldn't be lifting so heavy and trying to be so manly, like as if I lift anything. Oh my gosh, these people really don't know me. Things like that are kind of just like a baseline assumption. So there's just more money you have to pay to get care, and there's more money you have to pay to get money. Like, so I once I had the privilege of being cis assumed, like everyone assumes I'm cis, when they see me when I'm on the phone with them, because I'm not like, calling a bank and being like, hello, this is a transgender person. But it's very obvious when, your name and your gender presentation don't line up to someone, or your name and your gender marker don't line up to someone. And then they make the whole thing about your gender. They feel like you're not trustworthy. They ask you about, like, how you have to disclose all the names you've ever had anyway. um the the amount of sort of disclosure that you have to do around, like, do you have a nickname, do you have another name, do you have another name, and it's like, no, this is my only legal name. That really holds up processes. People don't understand who they're talking to on the phone. So we when we first bought our house, we had two mortgages, one that we just had to take out a second one to avoid PMI, which was fine. We paid that one off quickly. And then I went to try and refinance. And I was like, this is a nightmare. And that is what drove me to pursue paying for my legal name change, which at that time was not as easy as it is now. Now you just sort of fill out a form and you bring it to the courthouse and you deal with it. It was a whole process where like I needed a lawyer, and like, and I needed to pay to publish it in the newspaper. Like there was all sorts of like things that you had to pay for back then that you no longer, like now it's very accessible in most places in the Northeast. I think that other states, have made it more accessible also, but other states, don't want to let you change your gender marker, but they'll let you change your name anyway. Now it's an easier process. So once I changed my name, I was like, well, now I can deal with our mortgage rate. So I kind of kept rate hunting, kept rate hunting. Like I got us down from, I feel like we were never above, like we were never really above a three, honestly, a 3.89, I think. But I got us into the lower threes, and then I got us into the twos. And then I saw that rates were just tanking. I don't remember when that was. I feel like it was pre-COVID. Um, like everything was just like going down, down, down. I kept seeing like, lending tree like 1.59. I was like, I got to get on this. So I did it one final time, and we'll never get out of this rate until we pay off the mortgage, honestly, because that's, another thing though is that we'll probably have to move because of my physical disability, but which is another expense. Like, because even if it's a lateral move, moving still costs money. Like there are always fees involved, inspections and things like that. Um so that's another sort of aggravating financial inequity that I will face at probably a soonish point in time. There's no way to configure our home where it's sort of all on one level. The entryway can't even really be made accessible because of regulations regarding the historic nature of the front of our home. And so even if I were to completely reconfigure the house and make a ground floor bedroom, I still wouldn't be able to get in and out easily. So, there's a lot. There's a lot.
And oh, gosh, like it just, I mean, kind of back to what I was saying before, like it all just keeps compounding and compounding and compounding. And then you get to this point. And I mean, and it also sounds like, I mean, you've been super intentional about your finances as well. Like
I
you're,
have to be.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, and I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who just aren't, some people just aren't really that into calculating and money and all that stuff. And, I'm wondering if that's where like some of those stats come from. Cause I feel like you have to be, my husband and I, we're preparing to like bring a baby into the world. And that without any other added expenses of just, getting knocked up the old fashioned way is still expensive. Like, and
Yes, very.
I think that's something that just I want.
And
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
oh, sorry. I was just going to say, and also consider things like most cishet couples can have a baby shower and have family who will buy them things like, here's a crib, here's baby clothes. Like,
Yeah.
we didn't have that kind of support. Like,
Mm.
like everything we have to pay for, we have to pay for ourselves. And I am never going to assume that anyone will ever pay for anything of mine aside from my education. So honestly, if you're listening to this, those courses are how I pay my bills. Look into them. They're worth like, you can get an ACE award just by just by taking one. Look into them if you're interested in cultural responsiveness. Bring me on as a consultant in your workplace. Like that's how I'm able to pay my bills. Because it really is difficult, and I have been very intentional. And developing financial literacy when nobody taught it to me, I feel like was something that I had to just deal with when I was young. I remember when I was 24, um I don't remember how I figured out to how of like what to do in terms of investing, but I remember being like, you know what, like I don't really have any money, but I have to start putting money away because I'm going to have expenses. Because I started thinking, I need surgery, I needed top surgery, I needed it, I need surgery, I'm going to need a car because I have trouble walking. So public transportation can be difficult for me and uncomfortable. And, I need to be able to pay for my own medical care, even unrelated to gender, because back then it was hard to access even like sort of standard care. But now that's different. Um, and I started thinking when I was in my early 20s, what am I going to do? How am I going to pay for this? And round the clock work was one thing that I did that I'm still engaged in, but so was aggressively saving and making sure that I set budgets, which I have to say, like, currently currently the budget's not going great. Currently I'm since COVID, my partner became unemployed, and we did have an unsuccessful international move, which was very expensive. And honestly, the impetus for that move was because we wanted to be in a political climate where I felt more mentally healthy, and where I could work less because I didn't have to pay for so many things out of pocket related to my healthcare. Unfortunately, that was not something that worked out for us, nor was healthcare as accessible as I thought it would be, given my type of disability. But that's nobody's fault. The sort of major takeaways are that, if I didn't save as aggressively as I did, if I wasn't as intentional about, I'm not gonna, I'm going to make sure that this money from this account goes here every week and I don't touch it. And this percentage of that, is automatically invested. And I control this portion of my portfolio, but this portion is controlled by, a platform, making sure that our investments are diversified, like property, stocks, things that are, and that the stocks are different types of stocks, just making sure that like we have some kind of financial future. I know that at a certain point, I'm not going to be able to work anymore because of my disability unless I can actually, really work from home and sustain that. Or I'll have to work less even from home because I'll need to do things like enter, physical rehab programs. I'll have to pay for my own health insurance. I have to sort of think about the fact that like my capacity to work this much isn't going to last much longer. Um, and all of that just makes me put money away and put money away and put money away. And, at the same time, I do want to have money to spend and have fun with my kids. So, I told you before we started recording that we're taking a vacation next weekend. We're just going on a 3-day weekend. And it's sort of the fanciest travel I've ever done. I've always been one of those people who like, will sleep, my wife and I, before we had kids, we would stay in a hostel. We would camp, things like that. Nothing fancy, even slightly. And we are taking the kids to like a 5-star resort for 3 days, and all inclusive, because we've never done something like that. And I haven't taken a break um, in many, many years straight. And I'm going to give myself a 3-day break from work. There will be no working there. And saving for things like that is important. And I've started, another sort of like fancy vacation, because I also can't take the budget vacations that I used to be able to take because of my physical situation. I have to be able to be in a place that has a bed, that I'm not camping, that I'm not, in a hostel, like having to climb onto a bunk bed. I can't do that anymore. So wanting to travel, which is something that I really like doing, especially now having 2 more people with us, the kids do cost money. We have to budget really far in advance. So we have a trip planned for August, for April of 2023. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. That's less than a year away now. And we have a trip planned for August of 2025. That I'm already, and I already have buckets for these things. And that's something that I got really good at doing. It was like surgery, name change, house, vacation. I got really good at sort of putting money into different places and earmarking it, because that's important. And then that sometimes left us very little money to spend on anything. So, we're the people who own the house in the neighborhood that has, the highest rental rates in our city, and we'll eat ramen. Um, like, or we'll grow our own vegetables, things like that. Because it's been hard.
And just like everything you're saying, it's just, I mean, I just have the utmost respect for you just as a human being, because it's just like, it sounds like you've just had this attitude of like, okay, like this is who I am. This is my financial situation. This is my family situation, whatever it is. And just, okay, I just have to plan accordingly. And the fact that I think a lot of people have a lot of trouble with that, trans, gay, cisgender, like, or not. Like, I think a
Well,
lot
I
of
think
people have trouble with that.
everyone has trouble with that probably. And if I hadn't been so sort of like driven in my 20s, and I have to obviously credit my wife, who was number one when we met. She was more established than I was. She's a few years older than me, and when we first met, she had already been investing, and she already had, excuse me, she already had a Roth IRA, and a 401k through her job. So I was like, ooh, a Roth IRA, that's something I can just do. So that was sort of my intro. And I was like, I can do this, and then I can control where the money goes, and I can watch the markets, and I can take care of it myself, instead of just like throwing money into an account that is, unmanaged. And I got really interested in, using my ability to like look at data, and figure out what to do. I got really into doing that for a while, and we're still into that. And it's funny, like the last few days you just watch your portfolio like but like, I mean, I've watched it do that many times before. So,
Yeah.
to anyone who's a new investor, if you are listening to this and you just have been, listening to Danni like tell you to invest your money, and you've been doing it, and then, the last couple days you've just lost all your money, don't worry. It's happened to me a few times before. It'll come back. It's fine. Um, I started by investing $5 a week. Like that's how much I had.
I
Like
love that.
I started by saving, like $2 at a time. Do you know something that's a point of pride for me? I've never bought a cup of coffee outside of like being like not at my home early in the morning, like waking up somewhere else. Like if there's no hotel coffee, I need to have a coffee in the morning. But
Uh-huh.
I've never bought like I can make coffee at home.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, people buy a coffee every day, and no hate if you do that. But like, that's where my sort of like extra pennies would are from.
Yeah.
Like, not ever kind of using sort of like a drive-through food situation outside of like necessity. Which obviously like sometimes, you're on a road trip, you got to do what you got to do. But like I have always sort of been very intentional about that type of spending. Um, it's a lot to track, doing things like quitting my gym and then getting a different gym membership that's on sale, and
Mhm.
quit like I actually no longer have a gym membership. I have equipment at my house because I did the numbers, and I was like, you know what, I'm too disabled to take advantage of all of this equipment at the gym.
Yeah.
What is the monthly on an elliptical machine, and how much cheaper will it be over a 2-year period? And like that's already paid for itself. Like, it would have been more money to continue going to a gym and only accessing one or two machines. So we did it. We got two machines in our tiny little house in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We have two exercise machines, but it's cheaper than belonging to a gym.
Like the amount of scrappiness that I'm hearing right now makes me so happy.
I mean, like we do things like grow our own tomatoes and then like
Mhm.
dehydrate them and have sun-dried tomatoes and make tomato sauce. We have a farm share, and we will get all of our vegetables basically for the year, and like, we'll blanch them, we'll dehydrate them, we'll can things. I wish that we had more room. We don't have a yard. We have just sort of like a patio area where I have beds like up against our fence, but they don't produce a lot.
Mhm.
We can grow things in pots, but that's about it. If I could grow more food, that would be so ideal for me. If I could have, I am actually a vegan, because I don't the dairy industry just is not like a thing that I'm interested in. And I don't like meat. I have no sort of like vegan agenda at all, aside from the fact that like I don't want to buy into the dairy industry. I think it's really cruel, and I don't know. I also am just kind of grossed out by dairy, and like that's a personal thing, and I'm not trying to put that on anyone. But if we could have chickens, I would eat eggs, but I am not going to buy eggs at a store because like I know what the conditions were. I know how old they are. Like that's not something I'm gonna buy. Even though it's a cheap form of protein that other people should definitely use if they want a cheap form of protein. If I had chickens, I would have eggs. I kind of wish that I could have a farm right here in the city, and I
Mhm.
really would. Like I would grow a lot of food, I would have my own eggs, and I wouldn't be paying all those like ridiculous premiums for things that take up fuel that
Mhm.
like kind of are bad for the environment. Like I just, I would be more conscientious, and I would grow more food if I had more land around me, but I don't.
Oh, I'm all about like I have like a little, this
Do you
is
have a
totally off
garden?
topic, but I have like a little like the little top garden things where
Nice.
you like it is amazing. I have AC, I have these sugar plum tomatoes. They taste like candy. If only I wish there was a way I could send you some. They're delicious.
My strawberry patch is already coming back. I love that my strawberry patch comes back stronger every year. But now, unfortunately, we are in an urban area, and we do have rats now. We didn't have rats for many, many years, but they've torn down some like older buildings in the area, and now we do have rats over here. And I'm a little bit concerned about growing food in the soil where like I haven't seen tons of rats in our yard in particular, but I'm worried about when the food comes back. So I think I'm gonna have to make some changes and possibly not allow my children to eat the strawberries if the patch produces any that animals don't take. Um, it's too bad. But I grow things like lavender. I mean, I have grown a lot of food in pots, but I am hopefully rats can't get into this, but I feel like they can get into anything. I don't know. We didn't grow anything last summer because we just moved back in June, and I was like, the house is full of boxes. I'm not gonna like deal
Done.
with a garden. And then the rats came back. So I actually don't know what our food production situation will be this summer, but probably not that much.
But just like at the end of the day, just like getting creative. And I mean, just the fact that like, I mean, I want everyone to just be like inspired by your story. Like a lot of times, a lot of times I'll get a lot of questions about, okay, I'm facing this, I'm facing this, I'm facing this. Is it still possible for me to, to build wealth and to do X, Y, Z? And I think like your story is like such a, what is the word, like such an homage to that, like with all of the things that you've experienced, and you're still moving forward. And I think that's just a really inspiring thing to hear, is like, and that's like that's the message that I keep hearing as you've told me about your whole story, is like you're just continuing to move forward, continuing to make things better for that next generation coming up, but also continuing to move forward in your own life with your own family. And I think that's
No,
just
I mean, I have
awesome.
to. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's hard. It's hard every day because I feel, my life, all of our lives depend on our ability to provide for ourselves and our families, right?
Yeah.
And I have to do extra work. And I don't just have to do extra work to make extra money. I have to do extra work just to make spaces I'm in comfortable. I have to do extra work because I have a physical disability and I have to deal with that. I have extra like paperwork, extra appointments, extra expenses, and extra responsibility in terms of also being a trans elder and making sure that
Yeah.
there are resources in place for, suicidal children in my community. I have a lot on me and I have to keep moving through because if I don't, there won't be someone to make it better for other people. My family won't have a provider. I mentioned my spouse was unemployed for 2 years during COVID, and prior to that, she had had a very well established career, and um, it's very hard to get hired again at a high level um, when you've been unemployed for a couple of years. And her whole industry changed because things went remote. She was in translation and interpreting, and that's a whole other thing. But now she, when unemployment ended, she started working at a grocery store, and now she's actually starting work at a different grocery store as a manager next week. But it's been really humbling to walk that walk with her,
Yeah.
where like she also had difficulty finding employment that met her, sort of where she had been. And she was like, well, we still need the money, and I'm going to get a job. And she's been working at the Whole Foods around the corner, and
Mhm.
soon she's going to be working at a local supermarket, which we feel a little bit better about, and she'll be in a manager role. But like, this is, we've had a lot of setbacks,
Yeah.
and if we weren't as savvy as we are with our finances, and if I wasn't white, and I know that that's a factor,
Hmm.
we really wouldn't have what we have today, which is the ability to send our kids to camp, the ability to pay for our kids to play sports, the ability to. Last night on my way home from work, I don't usually do this, but I was hungry. I knew that I hadn't cooked dinner. It was a late day at my school job. There was a showcase of learning. It was great. There were a lot of people that were very happy there. Um, I stopped off and I got us burritos, and like I remember like the credit card transaction, and I always tip the maximum amount, because, and you should do that too. I know that you're all listening to this and you're all like, but I need my money, but I need my money. You know who needs it more? The person working the service job. And that's my commitment to wealth redistribution through what I do with the Credits Institute and all that. Like it, I have that in daily practice too. I think it's really important to make sure that we're always kind of honoring the people who are like serving us because, we're not in the position behind the counter making the burritos. But anyway, I was going to give the max tip and it was going to put our 4 burritos at an over $30 charge. And I was like, oh my God, this is rice and beans. And I was just like, it's 6:40 and I know I have to feed my kids, but like it only would take an hour for me to make this. And I was like, no, I'm doing it. They already made the burritos. And I'm having this dialogue with myself. And then and I was like, oh, whatever. And like I hit the 20% tip thing which took my 4 burrito purchase to like 31.28 or something. And I was feeling like, ugh, like I can't believe I just spent so much money on burritos. And the person looked at me and said, thank you so much. No one ever tips us. And I was like, you're welcome. Like, I'm really sorry that that's your experience of people. So, there's a lot of consideration in both being thrifty, but also making sure that when you have the opportunity and you do have the means,
Mhm.
that you're paying someone who's providing you with a service that you
Mhm.
wouldn't otherwise have access to. Like even just, wait staff and people who are at a coffee shop, if you do choose to pay for your coffee, like they're making less money than you are. And that's how, we bring people up along with us.
Yeah. And then even just like that's like a big part of, I mean, in our budget is just like leaving room for that generosity because we like me and my husband know like we are blessed beyond belief and to be able to give that to somebody else. I mean, that's what makes the world go around, right?
I have a very big collectivist attitude, and I think it's really important from like a humanistic lens to view everyone as sort of in this together. And,
Mhm.
if we aren't using wealth redistribution to do that, then, that's the most impactful thing we can do aside from, doing things that are basic safety, measures around like making sure that people have adequate access to like services and making sure that they're not in danger when they're with you. That's all well and good, and extraordinarily important. And beyond that, making sure that we consider that the only way to really increase equitable access to things within our society is to make sure that we are being generous when we can, that we are donating to things like mutual aid funds and to anything that we can in order to make sure that sort of there's the huge wealth gap in this country,
Mhm.
and there's like white cis het Americans and then everyone else. And
Mhm.
like of course that is the worst for people of various intersections. Like if you are a Black LGBTQIA plus identified person with a physical disability, like you're going to be sort of the worst off in our society.
Mhm.
And you kind of like, if you can think in a ladder of like who's worse off than whom in this situation, right? And like everyone who's on sort of like the other side of that, like the, segment of society should be actually looking at the rest of us and attempting to, do something about it.
Yeah.
Because the gap is really significant. It's not small, and it's not because, think about how hard I've worked, right? It's
Mhm.
not because I'm working less hard. And it's not like the person who's serving you at your grocery store. It's not because they're working less hard that they make less money. Like that's the job they have access to. you
Mhm.
know those are the industries that they can afford to work in. I mean, think about our patients, clients, and students, right? Like, they work in service industries, and very often they have disabilities.
Mhm.
And some of those people aren't even allowed to get married because they can't make a certain amount of money in order to collect their disability. So I mean, just making sure that we're that we're being generous whenever
Yeah.
possible is important to me also. And that's my jam.
Well, and I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time, but I have one last question for you, and then I'll kind of get you to tell us where everybody can go and find you. But
Okay.
I find, and this is just purely anecdotal, I find that there's this attitude kind of amongst, and please tell me if I'm saying this incorrectly. Just like your typical like white cisgender, I don't know, what is that the right way to say that?
Mhm.
um population of like, I feel like there's this theme of just kind of wanting to ignore these minorities, or just kind of like, oh, okay. And wanting to sort of just like brush y'all under the rug a little bit. What would you, and I didn't, and I'm finding more and more, like, there's definitely a lot of, like, just actual pushback of like, I don't agree, or, whatever, hostility. But then I find that there's this group that it's not hostility, it's more of just ignore. And I'm curious, like, what would you say to that? What would you say to that population? Because that's a lot of what I'm seeing. I maybe, again, that's purely my experience.
I mean, when you remain neutral, you're choosing the side of the oppressor. Like, to ignore a situation because you don't believe it directly affects you, even though it's impacting sort of the rights of people around you, is to take part in the oppression. And, I think that it's really important for anyone listening who, like, I don't want to guilt anyone into allyship, right? Like, that's not how allies are born, out of guilt. You have to be born out of a genuine sense of wanting things to be better. And, not just in terms of us having like the ability to access healthcare, which, like, it's really scary in certain states that people are taking away the rights of transgender people to bodily autonomy. Cisgender people have access to the same medications. I think that it's really hard for people to understand, like, you know, um, things like puberty blockers are used all the time in cisgender kids, like all the time. And the only kids that are being denied access to those are transgender kids, in most cases. And, I think that people don't understand. I mean, number one, that puts a ton of financial and emotional stress on families, and, could even cause suicide. But, I think that in order to, be an ally and have compassion, like, you have to actually know someone who it's impacting, right? So now you know me. Like, it's important to think about the fact that that could be you, that sometime somebody could find something about you. Like, think about sort of like your one intersection, if you have one, or maybe you have many, I don't know. And, if someone tried to, make that part of you illegal, and, like, I understand that, like, some of you who are listening, like, maybe you're immigrants, and maybe you have immigrants in your family, and I understand that, like, that, immigration is really stressful financially, and also in a similar way to this is like, people can be opposed to it, and people can want to take away legal rights of, people who are in this country who are from other countries, and that can be extraordinarily stressful. It's very similar. Like, when there were limitations being put on immigrants, and people like from our neighborhood were being like told that they were going to lose their visas because they were expiring, we went and we protested. Like, I get out there, I can barely stand up with my cane and a sign because I need people to see that I'm with them. And you don't have to go to a state house with a sign to help us. But if you can do things like, you see something like, oh, the Trevor Project is raising money, like, donate. They're trying to prevent the suicide of my people. Speak up at your workplace if you hear things that are, inappropriate being said, because you could be showing that you're an ally to someone who's, in a closet and scared. you know um do things like engage in education around this, because it's really important. um and make sure that when someone is sort of disclosing to you that they have these, if anyone ever discloses to you that they have these types of issues in terms of, like, oh, i um I can't do this because I'm not supported by my family, or I don't know, there's so many different scenarios I could come up with, but, what's most important is that you actually engage, because, like, legitimately people like me are killing themselves because of the overt political hostility and that landscape, and having their rights taken away and being debated online. I mean, people will comment on my Instagram all the time. I just delete their comments because I'm not gonna like let some internet troll control my life. But like other people are sensitive, and like, and children are being bullied like that. Just think about it and try and engage in the correct direction rather than ignore. Is there something I can do to help in this situation? What is it? Is it financial? Is it just, emotional? Like, hey, I saw that happen. Are you okay? Like, is it a way that you can show your support for people? Like, I'm wearing a pronoun pin. Like, it's pretty easy just to kind of show your support, and make yourself a visible ally, and taking action by doing things like signing a petition like that goes to your state legislature about, like, I don't support this bill that transgender people can't use the bathroom in public. Like, I'm against this. Or like, there's only one trans girl who plays, on a sports team in the entire state. Did you see those stats out of Utah? 75,000 high schoolers play sports in Utah. 75,000. Of them, four are transgender. Of them, one plays on a girls' sports team. The governor vetoed their the sports bill that they passed, and they overrode the veto to ban those four kids from playing sports out of 75,000. And the one trans girl is not like a champion of anything. She's just a normal kid who plays a sport. And
Mm.
like, thinking about the fact that like if you all could just sign the petitions when we post them, like that's a really hard thing. We are the only ones who sign our own petitions. People don't sign them. And it's like, we make these things that like you just swipe and it auto populates like with your Apple ID, like all your information. And we even create these bots that will populate an email to email a governor. Actually, I'll post some of those on Instagram because there's a bunch of things that need to go to governors this weekend. And, if you just click a link, it'll populate an email. You send it. That makes a difference for us. But, definitely actively engaging in education is really one way. So you want to know ways to find me. I can tell you right now. Find me on Instagram at transplaining, and also at Credits Institute. Credits Institute is where I offer those big CEU courses. They're expensive, but they're for graduate credit. So if you are a school SLP, the reason I did this, if you're a school SLP or someone who works where you can get bumped on a pay scale, you can get bumped on a pay scale by taking my courses. So the one that'll be running again in the fall, intersectional cultural responsiveness, that has 12 different topics or 12 different SLPs perspectives. That one's worth 3 graduate credits. The one that is running this summer, that's facilitated by Jordan Carroll, she's JRC, that SLP, that one is worth 2 graduate credits. And the one that's a one-day workshop that I am facilitating on June 24th in gender expansive voice services for the school SLP, where I can talk you through all sorts of scenarios. So if you're a school SLP, that one's worth 1 graduate credit, and 14 ASHA CEUs. The one with Jordan this summer is worth over 30, and the intersectional one is worth over 70. So you get that ACE award also. That's the type of education that I'm trying to provide. And I'm trying to educate in issues that are important to people like me. In terms of being an ally, if you work in a school and you learn how to provide gender affirming voice services, maybe it's not going to be relevant to you this year, right? But what if it's relevant next year? Then you don't have to seek out a course, and you will have taken one written by a transgender person that meets the WPATH standards of care, because you can't actually provide the service unless you actually have specific training. That's what the WPATH and what ASHA say. You require specific training. You can not only take that course directly with me, but you can be an ally. You can be like an embedded ally, and you got a graduate credit, so you can bump yourself on the pay scale. I mean, I kind of lay it all out so that people can benefit financially. The one of the, credit stands for culturally responsive education, diversity, inclusion training, but it has sort of a triple meaning. Not only giving us credit for the work that we've done, but we want to give you credit, so that you can sort of give credit where credit is due, and you can get your own credit and thereby sort of bump yourself up in terms of your salary. So it's like a little bit of an investment. You pay us some money, and then we get you the graduate credits to get you a higher salary. And that's at thecreditsinstitute.com. where you can find all of that. And this summer's course, Confronting Anti-Black Racism in Communication Sciences and Disorders, is going to be incredible. And I really hope that some of you will take it. It's on early bird actually until May 31st. So it's still during the early bird special, but oh my gosh, for your listeners, maybe I'll extend that. I don't know when you're going to do this.
Think that would be awesome because this episode's probably going to air like early June.
Pride Month. Okay. So I'm going to be running a Pride Month special on the Gender Affirming Voice for school SLP. So it's only going to be $199. 14 ASHA CEUs. You're going to be you're going to be learning all you need to learn in order to actually engage in this practice. And then you'll be an embedded ally if you're a school SLP, or even if you're just a pediatric SLP. It's still applicable because I'm just talking about adolescents. And I am talking about school environments as well. But adolescent development is a big component of the course. And I think that you'd be getting a steal, but also the summer course. So if you are interested in this, in the Confronting Anti-Black Racism in Communication Sciences and Disorders, and you hear about this course through Danni, I'm going to send her a code for y'all so that extends the early bird through whenever this airs. I guess I'd give it a week or two after that,
Okay.
because I want to make sure that you have a chance to listen and catch it, because it's not fair to mention it and then have it be gone by the time you get there, considering you're all trying to save money.
Yes.
The course is $1,299 on early bird,
Okay.
which I know is expensive, but it's an investment. If you're going to wind up benefiting from it financially in the long run. And that's what you're all here for. So I hear my 9-year-old on his way home, and I don't know if there's anything else you want to say before we wrap up, but find me at Transplaining.
Yes, no, that is it. You go hang out with your kiddos, and just thank you so much for coming on today. This was like better than I could have imagined, and for sharing your story. And I just hope that everyone out there, I want everyone to leave this episode full of just obviously love and respect for you, but empathy, and just knowing that everybody has a story. And I think that's just going to I think that just is going to help everyone to understand everyone better, and, becoming allies and all of the beautiful things that you said way better than I'm saying right now.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about money, because honestly, I don't ever do it because, I'm in a tremendous place of privilege over most people in my community. And, I don't think I should be talking about money aside from when I'm talking to my credit contributors about their shares.
Well, you can always geek out with me about money anytime. I would love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yes,
and thank you all for listening.
Yes. And make sure you are following AC at Transplaining, and all of the links to all of his courses and everything mentioned, those are going to be in the show notes for you. And you can go find him and all of his awesomeness. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Be sure you are subscribed so you can continue to get more no fluff content from me. And I would really appreciate it if you took a small amount of time to leave a review for the podcast. It really helps to boost it in the search engines and ratings, and it allows me to continue to produce this content for you and get this message out there to other SLPs and healthcare professionals. And as always, happy wealth building, and go do the dang thing.